Once upon a time, in the quaint seaside town of Harborview, where the salty breeze carried whispers of adventure and the lighthouse beam cut through the fog like a guiding truth, there lived a woman named Leela. She was in her early 30s, with a wild mane of curly hair and eyes that sparkled with untold stories. Leela was an aspiring novelist, crafting tales of mystery and human connection in her cozy attic apartment overlooking the waves. Her dream was to see her books on shelves in bookstores across the country, to touch readers' hearts with her words, and to build a career that allowed her to live fully through her imagination. But despite years of effort, her manuscripts gathered dust on editors' desks, query letters went unanswered, and literary agents politely declined. Each rejection felt like a wave crashing against her resolve, eroding her confidence bit by bit. One stormy afternoon, as Leela sat at her cluttered desk surrounded by stacks of notebooks filled with drafts and revisions, she stared at yet another email. "Your submission doesn't fit our current list." The words blurred through her tears of frustration. She'd spent countless hours at writers' conferences, dominating panels with her eloquent speeches about character development and plot twists. She'd filled online forums with lengthy posts explaining her unique voice, believing that the more she talked about her work, the more she'd convince others of its worth. Yet here she was, no closer to publication. Why, she wondered, could so many people, like herself, talk for hours and yet never advance, never learn, never build the bridges that brought them the life they wanted? Why did the loudest voices often end up the weakest when the results were counted? That question had haunted Leela for years. She'd met men who could dominate a room with words, captivating audiences with their charisma, but they never dominated their own habits, procrastinating on their writing until inspiration struck, which it rarely did. She'd met women who could fill notebooks with speeches, eloquent manifestos on creativity, but they never filled a bank account, their dreams remaining unpublished fantasies. How could someone talk so much but know so little? How could someone explain everything yet solve nothing? Leela paced her attic, the rain pounding like an insistent drum. Most people, she realized, thought the secret was in the talking. They believed the more you explained, the more persuasive you'd be. They thought the more noise you made, the more attention you'd get. Some figured if they just kept speaking, pitching, networking, self-promoting, sooner or later the world would reward them for effort alone. Others believed that if they could out-talk the competition, they'd win the prize, a book deal, a bestseller spot. But Leela was starting to see that was the wrong answer. Talking didn't multiply your knowledge. Talking didn't give you an edge in business or in life. Talking was often just rehearsing what you already knew, an echo chamber of your own mind. And if all you did was echo what you already knew, you ended up living the same year over and over, calling it a decade. The truth was different. The truth was that listening was the greater power. Listening was the gate to wisdom. Listening let you gather while talking spent. Listening was how you learned the nuances, the hidden clues, the details that others missed because they were too busy crafting their next sentence. Listening was where the gold lay. Think about it. Nature itself taught this. You were given 2 ears and 1 mouth, not the other way around. That was nature's subtle reminder to use the ears more than the mouth, twice the listening, half the talking. That balance alone would change someone's career, their relationships, even their bank account. Leela recalled an example from her own life. She'd once attended a literary workshop where a young writer, eager to impress, talked nonstop, explaining his opinions, his plans, his grand vision for revolutionizing the genre. The seasoned editor across the table said almost nothing. She just nodded, asked a few quiet questions, and kept taking notes. A year later, the listener, the editor, had launched a successful imprint, wealthy from deals with emerging talents. The talker was still trying to be heard, his manuscript unpublished. Why? Because the listener learned what the writers valued, what they feared, what they were willing to trade in revisions. The talker missed it all because he was too busy broadcasting. It was like the two farmers Leela had heard about in an old fable. One farmer spent his day yelling at the ground, shouting instructions to the seeds, telling them how tall they should grow. The other farmer bent low, studied the soil, listened to the wind, watched the sky. Which one brought in the harvest? The one who listened to the land, not the one who shouted at it. So remember this. Talking showed what Leela already knew. Listening showed what she was willing to learn. Talking could make her look smart for a moment. Listening could make her wise for a lifetime. Talking built noise. Listening built knowledge. If she wanted power, listen more than she spoke. If she wanted wisdom, gather before she gave. If she wanted influence, understand before attempting to be understood. That was the law, the secret, and if she captured it, it would serve her for the rest of her days. But most people resisted this lesson, Leela knew. They believed listening was weakness, that silence meant you didn't have much to say, that you weren't sharp, that you couldn't compete. Some even thought if they paused too long, others would take advantage of them. That wasn't true. What happened when someone bought into those false ideas? A man in business refused to let anyone finish a sentence. He interrupted, corrected, added his own twist before the other person was done. On the surface, he looked strong, confident, decisive. But underneath, he missed valuable information. He didn't catch the customer's real concern, didn't hear the hesitation that signaled doubt, didn't learn the competitor's weak point because he cut them off too soon. What looked like power ended up being loss. Or what about a parent who never listened to a child, always giving instructions, always correcting, always talking? What did the child learn? That their voice didn't matter, that they weren't understood. Soon, the child stopped sharing, and the parent wondered why there was distance in the relationship. That was the cost of believing talking was always superior. Here's the truth. Listening wasn't weakness, it was strategy. Listening was positioning yourself to receive what others gave away freely: clues, lessons, insights, emotions. If you paid attention, people revealed exactly what they needed, what they feared, what they were willing to do, but only to the ear patient enough to hear it. It reminded Layla of the old story of the chess player. A beginner rushed his moves, quick to show how fast he could react. The master sat still, silent, eyes on the board, calculating, waiting. He moved less often but won more often. Why? Because he listened to the board, noticed the small details, didn't waste energy making noise. He invested energy in understanding the position. Life worked the same way. The person quick to speak burned energy. The person quick to listen gained energy. The speaker spent. The listener accumulated. One scattered seeds in the wind. The other harvested fruit. When Leela started listening with intention, something remarkable happened. She began to hear not just words, but patterns. She heard what people repeated, and repetition was always a signal of importance. She heard what people avoided saying, and avoidance was often more revealing than confession. She heard tone, hesitation, excitement. All of that was information she could use to make wiser decisions. Listening was leverage, the hidden advantage. It was like compound interest. You might not see the payoff in the first hour, the first day, or even the first week, but over time, the accumulation of knowledge, trust, and insight became enormous. The talker ended up with broken information. The listener became wealthy in understanding. So the wrong answers always led to loss. Believing listening was weakness led to blind spots. Believing talking was persuasion led to empty results. Believing silence was failure led to missed opportunities. Those were traps, and most people lived in them for years. But the right answer, that listening was more powerful than talking, led to growth, to trust, to influence. It led to wisdom, to connection, and it never ran out of value. If listening was truly the greater power, how did Leela see it at work? Let's draw a few clear pictures. Think of the courtroom. A good attorney knew when to argue, but the great attorney knew when to stop talking and start listening. The opposing side often revealed more in their testimony than in their silence. A careless phrase, a small contradiction, a shift in tone that could change the entire case. The attorney who listened closely was the one who won. The one who talked too much often missed the golden moment. Listening worked like a mirror. When you listened carefully, people saw themselves more clearly, and that made them trust you. Because what most people wanted was not to be talked into something, but to be understood. Talking demanded attention. Listening earned it. Two men went fishing. One threw his line in, then started shouting at the water, insisting the fish should bite, explaining how good the bait was. The other man cast his line quietly, watched the ripples, noticed the patterns of the fish beneath. He paid attention. One man talked at the lake, the other listened to the lake. Now, which one came home with dinner? The answer was obvious. Listening was kind of like mining. The surface looked plain, ordinary, but underneath lay veins of gold. The miner who hammered without observing, who shouted at the mountain, gained nothing. The miner who studied the rock, listened to the sound of the pick, noticed the faint gleam. That was the miner who discovered treasure. Words were like the surface, listening dug beneath. So the next time Leela was in conversation, she counted how many questions she asked compared to how many statements she made. Most found the balance heavily tilted toward talking. But if she reversed that ratio, something changed. Suddenly, she learned more, connected more, saw more, because questions opened doors and listening allowed her to walk through them. Listening was patience in action, and patience always multiplied results. Talking was immediate, like spending cash. Listening was slow, like investing. The spender ended with empty pockets. The investor ended with compound wealth. So never confuse silence with weakness. Never confuse listening with passivity. Listening was activity of the highest kind. It was collecting data, building understanding, positioning herself for advantage. It was the soil where wisdom grew. Talking declared what she knew today. Listening built what she'd know tomorrow. To turn this into a challenge for herself, because ideas were nice, but discipline made them real, Leela asked. How many opportunities had slipped through her fingers because she was too busy talking? How many relationships cooled because she didn't pause long enough to listen? How many sales, promotions, partnerships, or insights vanished because she filled the silence instead of learning from it? That was the price of ignoring this principle. She'd watched people ruin their chances because they couldn't keep quiet. In business meetings, some spoke too soon and revealed their strategy before it was time. Others interrupted and lost respect instantly. In negotiations, many thought talking gave strength, but strength often lay in silence. The person who listened gathered leverage while the talker gave it away. And here's the test. The next time she was in conversation, Leela disciplined herself to wait 3 seconds before responding, just 3 seconds of pause. She noticed something remarkable. In that space, people often revealed more. They filled the silence with the truth they hadn't planned to share. She learned more in those 3 seconds than in 3 minutes of talking. Or she tried this. When about to speak, she asked herself, am I saying this to add value or just to be heard? Most of the time, people talk just to fill the air, but value came from listening first, then speaking with precision. Imagine the difference if every word she spoke was backed by listening. Her words would carry weight. People would lean in because they knew she didn't waste language. When she talked less, her words actually mattered more, because scarcity bred value. A diamond was valuable because it was rare. Gold was precious because it wasn't scattered everywhere. Her words could be the same if she used them less often. After listening carefully, they gained the impact of gold and diamonds. People didn't follow a leader because he could talk endlessly. They followed because he listened, understood, and then spoke with clarity. A leader who listened created loyalty. A leader who only talked created distance. Families worked the same way, friendships too. Listening built bonds that talking alone could never create. But remember, listening wasn't passive. It wasn't sitting in silence while her mind drifted. Real listening was active, leaning in, watching the eyes, hearing the tone, noticing the pauses. It was being fully present, not rehearsing her next line. And that discipline was rare. Most people thought listening was waiting for their turn to talk. That wasn't listening. That was holding your breath. So Leela practiced listening with intensity. In her next conversation, at a writers' group, she decided she would talk half as much and listen twice as much. She was amazed at what she discovered: patterns she never noticed, opportunities she always missed, connections that were waiting for her all along. The world didn't reward the noisiest. The world rewarded the ones who noticed, who observed, who listened. Talking got attention for a moment. Listening earned trust for a lifetime, and trust was the foundation of every reward worth having. The beauty of listening was that it didn't just apply in one corner of life, it was universal. It worked everywhere, no matter what she valued most. Think about it. Every person had different priorities. Some cared about achievement, some about peace. Some wanted to build, others to explore. But in every pursuit, the skill of listening multiplied the results, because listening helped her see reality as it was, not as she imagined it. If she valued growth, listening brought the lessons faster. Books spoke if she was willing to hear the author's intent. Nature spoke if she was willing to notice its rhythms. Even failure spoke if she was willing to listen to what it taught instead of arguing with it. Growth didn't come from repeating the same words, it came from absorbing new ones. If she valued connection, listening gave her a bridge. People opened doors for the ones who heard them, not the ones who outshouted them. But even beyond people, listening created connection with life itself. It tuned her into details, the small cues, the subtle changes, the signals most people ignored. And those details often carried the key that changed everything. If she valued progress, listening showed her the path. Roads didn't announce themselves with signs every step of the way, often they whispered. The world gave signals, faint at first, that guided her toward the next step. Those who were attentive caught them, those who weren't stumbled right past. Listening was how she caught the signal. If she valued wisdom, listening was the only way to earn it. Wisdom didn't arrive by talking. It arrived by noticing, by absorbing, by allowing experiences, hers and others, to reveal their lessons without rushing past them. Wisdom grew quietly in the soil of listening. Listening even affected her inner world. The words she spoke to herself shaped her direction, but the words she heard inside, her conscience, her intuition, her deeper sense of truth, were often the ones that mattered most. Most people drown those voices out with noise, but when she learned to quiet down and listen inside, she uncovered guidance that could save her years of wandering. And the best part was, listening could be practiced anywhere. She didn't need a classroom, a certificate, or permission. She could practice it in a conversation, in nature, while reading, while reflecting. It was a portable discipline, always available, always valuable. Here's the challenge Leela embraced. Apply it to what she cared about most. Whatever she held dear, she tried listening more in that area. She listened to the patterns, listened to the lessons, listened to the signals, didn't rush to speak, didn't rush to judge, just collected, observed, absorbed. She found clarity increasing, mistakes decreasing, opportunities multiplying. Listening was not tied to a single pursuit. It was a master key, and like any key, once she held it, she could open whichever door she chose. So she decided which doors mattered most to her: publication, connection with readers, personal growth, and let listening do its work. If listening was truly the greater power, then the final question was not whether she agreed, it was whether she would apply it. Agreement didn't change a destiny. Notes in a journal didn't change the years ahead. Only discipline did. And listening, though simple, demanded discipline. Because the urge to talk was strong, the urge to prove, to explain, to fill the air came naturally. The choice to listen had to be made deliberately. So on one side she could go on talking, repeating her same ideas, reliving her same patterns, replaying the same year of experience over and over. On the other side she could step into a different life by listening more, listening to people, to events, to her own inner signals. One path left her stuck, the other opened new ground. Silence was not weakness, patience was not passivity. Listening was strength dressed in quiet clothes. Those who learned it rose above the crowd, because most people were too busy shouting to notice the clues scattered all around them. So Leela left herself with this final challenge. Every conversation she entered, every meeting, every interaction, she asked herself, am I talking to be heard, or am I listening to understand? If she asked that question daily, she would slowly train herself into the habit, and that habit would serve her in ways that talk never could. Choose carefully. Every day she was offered the same choice: repeat what she already knew or discover what she didn't. One kept her where she was, the other moved her forward. Let others chase the noise if they wanted. She made the wiser choice. She listened, and by listening, she learned, she grew, she saw what others missed. That's how the quiet ones changed the world. Months turned into a year, and Leela's life transformed. At a literary festival, instead of monopolizing the Q&A, she listened to agents discuss market trends and reader preferences. Armed with those insights, she revised her manuscript, tailoring it to unspoken needs. An editor, noticing her thoughtful questions in a follow-up email, requested a full read and offered a contract. Her first book hit the shelves, not through loud promotion but through quiet understanding of her audience. Readers connected deeply, sharing how her stories mirrored their unspoken struggles. Leela's bank account grew, but more importantly, so did her wisdom and her world. In the end, it was the power of listening that turned her whispers into a roar of success.